bonds, which are basically, this is like where Brenda showed us water molecules bonding, and she was like this. But she has her butt being negative oxygen and her two arms being positive. So they like bond like this to like other molecules on their butts. And so, because the oxygen has a partial minus charge and the hydrogens have partial plus charges, so they like to attract and they form these like weak bonds where they're always just shifting around. And that gives us the really cool properties of water, which is where it's liquid. And you can do really cool things with it, and the hydrogen bonds can break and form a gas. Really cool things.
It's misleading because it's not bonding at all.
It's interactions.
It's just interactions. It's like, imagine if you were like, imagine a bunch of magnets going through space, and if the one was passing another, they might kind of like want to like be near each other. Weak forces are so important. We wonder like how our DNA is replicated. Well, in fact, our DNA is like actually pulled apart because there's these weak interactions between the base pairs of DNA. We wonder how water works. Well, water interacts with these weak interactions. That's why it's like sticky. So you know when you get out of the shower and the water is just literally stuck to you? That's because of these hydrogen bonding that water does.
So they're weak by themselves, but when there are a lot of them together, they're really strong.
This is interesting because, you know, I know most of you in this room probably know this, but I guarantee you if you ask the average American, a lot less people than you would think would actually understand that the main backbone element of life, of all life, whether it be that plant out there, whether it be us, whether it be a kitten, whether it be a bacteria, whether it even be a virus, which we don't even really understand if it's alive, is carbon. Organic chemistry is based off carbon. And carbon is really awesome.
Carbon's really important. It's not living things. It serves as a backbone for almost all organic molecules. So here's carbon on the periodic table there in the corner. It's element number 6, which means it has 6 protons, 6 electrons. 2 of them are in the inner s orbital. So it has 4 available for bonds. So it likes to make 4 friends.
Yeah, I mean, I totally forgot that. Usually I'm just like, I don't even remember that I had 6, but I'm just like 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it has 5. How many does nitrogen have? 5. How many does oxygen have? 6. How much does fluorine have? 7. How much does neon have? 8. The periodic table's awesome.
Yeah. See, it says 3A, 4A, 5A, 6A. That's the number of valence electrons. You know it's now.
So it just means bivalence electrons with electrons in that outer shell, in that p orbital that we went over.
That are available for bonding.
That are available for bonding.
So, as you can see, underneath carbon is silicon. Silicon can make 4 bonds. Silicon is way, way more common in the Earth's crust. Why don't we use silicon for all the biomolecules? Does anybody know? Oh, question?
Yeah, so we use silicon as like the building block for a lot of our electronics, is my understanding, kind of. Like, so like LEDs and like solar cells, a lot of silicon is used. Would you be able to swap that out for carbon and still get a similar function? So it's like...
That's what we're asking you guys.
LEDs.
Tell us.
Yes, you can. I think you can.
Yeah.
Why?
Go ahead.
Well, I think silicon is one of the building blocks of life because I'm pretty sure that in order to make soil, you had the rocks had to break down into like soluble silica, like tiny particles that could be uptaken as like plant nutrients, basically. And that's basically like, we used to just have rocks and those broke down eventually to form soil, which allowed our modern plants to flourish, and then we eat plants, like that's obviously the basis of what we are, you know, what we're eating. So I think that silica has something to do with it, even though we're made of carbon.
So there's like, there's those main elements we're talking about, like carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, those are the main ones, and there's these micro elements like chlorine and magnesium. And then there's these like micro to the tiniest scale that it just might be there, and silicon kind of falls into that category. It's not used in our bodies really right now for anything.
And the reason is because the bond of silicon is not as strong as carbon bonds. And the reason that's important is because carbon bonds structure our entire bodies, and they need to be really strong bonds. And also, when you break carbon bonds, you release a lot of energy, and the energy can be harnessed basically to power our entire bodies.
Yeah, so you know what this is saying is, remember how I was talking about, oh, carbon can have 4 friends, or carbon can be really good friends with one person. Well, silicon could be replaced right here. But the reason why it's not there is because of what Jess just said. It's too big. It just doesn't work. But if we look back at this periodic table one more time, it's so cool. Wait. So cool. Silicon is sitting right under carbon because there's 4 valence electrons inside our shell. That's why this periodic table is just an amazing structure.
But the other important thing also to know about carbon is it can exist as a gas and it can dissolve in liquid, which silicon can't do. So it can be recycled through our bodies. So we can breathe in carbon. It can be transported in our blood, and we can use it to build
Does anyone know a solid state of carbon?
Diamonds.
And one of the
Ash.
graphite
Yeah.
Graphite and buckyballs.
and buckyballs.
It's interesting because carbon's like kind of like a semi-metal, like non-metal, can act as an insulator or conductor. So it's really interesting.
And it can go between these different
And
forms.
coal, right?
Yeah, all fossil fuels like based on carbon too, including natural gas and oil.
Oxygen is also really important. It's the third most abundant element in our atmosphere after hydrogen and helium. And it's too reactive to exist on its own, so it usually bonds to form O2, covalent bonds. And it's used in cellular respiration as the ultimate electron acceptor. So basically,
It's the question of every MCAT or like traditional. There's this thing called the electron transport chain we're going to go into, which has to do with generating energy. And at the end of that electron transport chain, in a little structure in our cells called the mitochondria, that O2 is the terminal electron acceptor. And I guarantee you, most students have just memorized that and really have no idea what it means. Probably me included.
it means that, yeah, the electrons during cellular respiration just travel through like this entire process and create ATP, and at the end they need somewhere to go. Oxygen loves electrons, holds them. Basically, more or less. I'm not saying what else was there. And I was going to talk about it. Go back to the periodic table. So just to remind you guys how important the periodic table is. There's oxygen, number 8, has 8 protons, 8 electrons. And it's in column 6A, which means it has 6 in its valence shell. Likes to make 2 bonds. Or 1 bond, that's 2 electrons. Sorry.
Is this where we should talk about electronegativity at all? It's kind of interesting to just remember that elements that are kind of there's trends, there's little arrows you can draw on the periodic table, and there's this one called electronegativity, which I don't want you guys to know, but I just want you guys to realize that, and we're going to explain this in the biochemistry lecture, but things like carbon organic molecules that have elements like oxygen on there, that have elements like chlorine, they tend to be really acidic. They tend to be polar, which means that there's a lot of electron density in one area, and there's not. Water is a great example of something that's polar. Whereas a hydrocarbon molecule, like some type of oil or butter or stuff like that, is not polar. It's just made of carbons and hydrogens. Whereas something that's polar, like water, is made of
Electronegative atoms like oxygen or fluorine, who all are very strong negative charge because they like to pull the electrons for themselves.
I'm sure you guys have heard of hydrochloric acid, HCl. It's really polar. Steven.
So acid is consisted of things that are electromagnetic, but something that's not.
Things are more acidic when they have an electronegative atom in them because
there's 2 definitions of an acid. There's a Lewis acid and there's a Bronson-Lowry acid. For our purposes, we're going to be going by the Bronson-Lowry definition because it just pertains so much more to organic chemistry than it does. And personally, I think both are really important. But for us, it's really just about kind of whether something's going to receive a hydrogen or give a hydrogen.
So an acid is something that wants to give up its proton, and it's more likely to give up its proton if it's conjugate. Look, it's a little bit beyond, but its conjugate base is more stable, and so it's more stable if it has an electronegative atom that likes to hog all the negative charge. But that's a little bit unrelated, so you should probably just.
Let's just say compound.
I have a question about compound. I know that alcohol can dissolve both polar and nonpolar compounds. There's like butane could only dissolve nonpolar compounds, and like water polar.
Yeah.
Do you know why that is?
Yeah, I'll show you.
What a semi-polar compound?
Yeah, I'll show you. Structure of alcohol looks like this. Can you see it now?
That's an O, not a C.
Okay, so remember what I just said? That, can you guys see this?
Not really.
Put it on the white screen.
CH3, CH2, OH.
That's called ethanol. That's alcohol. So we see that there's a region of this molecule that's very non-polar, which is the CH3, CH2, and then there's this OH right here, which is polar. That's why alcohol can dissolve things that are polar and non-polar. But if you didn't understand that, we're going to get even more into that, because I have a great example for you guys that I'm going to bring up once we go over phospholipid membranes. This concept is important. I just want you guys to know that when you have a molecule that's really carbon heavy, carbon and hydrogen heavy, it's hydrophobic. It's like oil. So when you see olive oil or when you see butter, there's a lot of carbons and hydrogens there, and there's not a lot of oxygens or chlorine or different type of electronegative atoms that are high in electron density. When you see something like water, or when you see something like even alcohol, or when you see something like hydrochloric acid, there's these elements that have a lot of electron density in certain aspects, that in certain parts of the molecule, and that molecule is more acidic. But a little off topic.
Did we talk about nitrogen?
Nitrogen is really important. It's one of the most common elements in the atmosphere that's really hard to break up, so we have plants that do it for us. We use it in things.
Okay, so if you can't see my board now, I want to just draw some molecules. I want us to like realize what it means when we see a molecule. Like, I'm sure you guys have all seen a structure like this. Who's seen a picture like this before? Who's never seen something like this before, ever in their lives? All right. Well, we have a couple of people that have never seen it. Anyway, so I just want us to realize kind of what is going on there. So who knows, I'm sure of the science majors, who knows what element is going to be sitting right here?